one of the effective tools when it comes to organic is called the generalist principle. Is how can you make your content interesting to somebody that has no interest in your business, no interest in you, doesn't know who you are. So like a prime example of that is there's a YouTuber called Graham Stephan who teaches finance to millennials. So his most viewed video is how I bought a Tesla for $78. Even if you don't have an interest in finance, you would have an interest in seeing how this guy bought a Tesla for $78. And within that story that he's telling, he is teaching finance.
What is up, action taker? Welcome back to After Hours Entrepreneur, your guide to your first six-figure year. Woo! Today you are in for a banger. We are joined by best-selling author Brendan Kane. I've been reading through his books over the past few weeks, and they are awesome. First book, 1 million followers, How I Built a Massive Social Media Audience in 30 Days, as well as Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. We are going to be diving deep into some of the concepts that you can use to get real attention, which turns into real sales. I just got to kind of brag on Brendan here for a few minutes because he is bananas. He's worked with celebrities like Taylor Swift, Rihanna, Adriana Lima. He's generated over 1 million followers in, again, just 30 days, which is nuts. Generated over $1 billion in revenue, worked with MTV, Viacom, Vice Magazine, Paramount Pictures, IKEA, Skechers, and his marketing company, Hook Point, is just killing it. And there's a reason for that, because Brendan is really good at what he does. He's very good. If I had to give Brendan some really great acknowledgement here, it's that the man understands attention. He understands how to get it, how important it is, how to find it. And he also understands how to go the extra mile to stand out. There are a few concepts in this episode that I really want you to pay attention to, one of which is the importance of pattern disruption, the importance of the generalization concept, which we're going to go into here in just a minute, and how important that is, as well as feeling facts and fun. Stay tuned to find out more from the man, the myth, the legend, Brendan Kane. DJ, roll the tape. Brendan, what's up?
Good to see you.
Yeah, Brendan, good to see you, hear you, read you. I'm sitting here with, on my desk, 2 of your books, 1 million followers, How You Built a Massive Audience in 30 Days, and then Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. And honestly, they're basically going to be required reading for anyone that comes onto my team over here at Mark Smart Media. So thank you.
No, thank you for checking it out. I appreciate it, Mark.
Yeah, it's really good. And I want to get into some nuts and bolts because I've got questions. Oh, do I have questions? But before we get into the questions, I want to go back in time. I'm going to flesh out a little bit of your story because there's some things that you've done that I find very interesting. I want to go back to young Brendan in film school, learning the business, learning the industry. And you recognize that it wasn't just enough to know how to create films, but you needed to learn the business side of the market too, right?
Yeah, well, I wanted to produce films. So I figured, you need to know some element about business to produce a film, and quickly realized they don't teach you anything about business in film school. So proceeded to start a few internet companies while I was going to college, really just to learn and experiment. And that really set me on the path of, social and digital media.
Yeah, just casually creating internet companies in the off time. It's not like you got a million things going on. So that was actually the question I had for you, because this is after hours entrepreneurship in a nutshell. It's putting in that after hours effort. What were some of the businesses that you were building back then? This is what, 2000 and early 2000s, right?
It was about 2003, 2004. We had one where Alexa was like a big thing back in the day for tracking like Alexa rankings and stuff. And we had a software. We literally bought it for like $50, but it could help you increase your Alexa ranking. And then we had an email marketing one and just some light digital consulting as well.
So I'm curious, are any of those still around today?
No. Again, they were more like experiments. They weren't like, oh, I'm going to try and generate. I wasn't doing it to necessarily make money. I mean, obviously we were making money with it, but it was more centered around the actual experience. Almost like you could almost consider it like a school project, but it wasn't assigned.
Yeah. Yeah. It actually brings me back to high school, and I don't know where I found the time to do this, but I made this like game for the graphing calculator. It's kind of like a centipede type game. And, Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. I got a few people at school to download it and to play it, and that was kind of neat. But I didn't actually turn into any money, and I'm not into coding at all. But what's interesting to me, Brendan, about these two businesses these businesses that you were building, they had nothing to do with film, right? Or where's the overlap there?
Well, actually, you know what? I just remembered I had built a movie tickets website. I don't know that we did launch it, but I don't know that we did anything with it. But again, it wasn't, especially at the time that I was doing this, like digital video wasn't a thing. It's not like it was then. So you couldn't really do a lot around, producing movies or businesses around movies. I mean, digital video was kind of coming on, but it wasn't at where it's at today. So there wasn't, outside the movie tickets website that I built, which I forgot about, there wasn't much that I could do specifically for film.
But you had a natural knack very early on to recognize attention, right? Which actually reminds me of Gary Vaynerchuk in a lot of ways. Attention is the key. Nobody was talking about influencer marketing. Nobody was talking really about video. Somehow you intuitively recognized, though, that digital marketing was important. Were there any clues? Were there any breadcrumbs that you were following to get there?
Well, when I started working in the film industry, I mean, first off, I started at the bottom like everybody else. I was making coffee and copies and deliveries, and I can get into the story of how I kind of worked my way up very quickly. But when I was working on one of the first movie campaigns was for a movie called Crank with Jason Statham. And it was like, it wasn't a huge film compared to like other films. I think the production budget was like 12 million. Now that sounds like a lot of money for somebody, just in general, but you look at the average action movie, it's 150 million. So we also had a very small marketing budget, and I was just looking at ways that we could potentially tap into online audiences, and YouTube was launched and it was going, and I just saw that there were these creators that were getting millions of views on these videos. So I figured, well, why not reach out to them and ask them? I think I made a list of the top 100, and I just sent them a message saying, are you interested in interviewing a movie star? And I got like 5 or 6 of the biggest influencers at the time to do it for no cost. And again, at that time, there's no such thing as an influencer. They weren't called anything. They were just people producing videos and posting them on YouTube. And just piqued my curiosity that nobody was really connecting with these individuals, and started that way.
So this, to your point, very revolutionary at the time, right? This is like, there's no influencers, there's no influencer marketing. It's not even close to where it's at today. Like you said, YouTube just came out. How did you get the president, the marketing team? How did you get the studio to buy into this idea? Typically, big established businesses don't like to change up what they're doing, right? How did you get them to buy into the idea?
Well, I was working, so there's like a delineation. The first studio I worked for was actually a mini studio. So they were producing, like they were more than just a production company, because they were very hands-on, but they had bigger studios distribute it. But I could get away with a lot more because they had the power. They put in the money for the film, and they're putting in part of the money for the marketing to kind of like force the studio to allow me to do it. And I just made a business case for it. I'm like, listen, we're spending all this money on print, television, and radio. Here's an opportunity that's not going to cost us any money, and here's the potential upside. And there was really no downside to it. So it was a pretty easy use case. I think it's just, I just always learned is like, what are the big pain points that people are experiencing? And for a studio, you're investing a lot of money into these films. You're investing tens of millions of dollars or more to produce a single piece of content. And then you're spending tens of millions of dollars or more marketing that piece of content. And on top of that, you need hundreds of millions of people around the world to know about this single piece of content in a matter of months. So there's a lot of stress and anxiety of, is this film going to perform? And if you come with an idea that has the potential to reach millions of people to effectively help the box office revenue, they're going to be open and receptive to it.
I mean, it makes perfect sense in hindsight, right? Everyone's probably like, oh yeah, I would have known, but people didn't. People are still shoveling money towards, television advertising. And it still happens. But
Yeah, I mean, they're still doing it today.
right, right. And, attention. What happened next, right? So you have a huge success. Did you know that you wanted to stay an employee for this company? Because eventually you
No.
made that shift you made that shift from employee to employer. So I'm interested in how that transfer made.
Well, I was getting very bored in the studio system because it's very corporate, and I found myself asking for permission to do things more than actually doing things. So the next step for me is I was still working for this studio, but this was after MySpace was acquired by Fox. I wanted to really understand, well, how is this going to represent, I think it was like 580 million in the press, and I think it was an extra like 80 to 90 million for the founders. So it was over 600 million for this social network, which seems like cheap now compared to what they're valued. But I wanted to understand, well, how are they going to monetize that? And that's when I came up with the idea to build, the first influencer technology platform, because I saw all of these individuals putting movie trailers, Nike posters, Prada images, and things on their MySpace profile. But MySpace wasn't making any money off of that. They were just stuck in the bottom basement CPMs, which wasn't really generating massive profit. And I thought, well, why shouldn't MySpace and also the individual person posting about that product, because it's consumer to consumer communication and people sharing products and services with their friends, why shouldn't both MySpace and that individual get a cut of when somebody engages with that? So that was the next step, and I got the president of the studio to invest in the prototype of it and built that and ended up licensing it to MTV. And then through that licensing deal, that's when I left and started going off on my own.
So I got to stay on this for just a minute here, Brendan, because one of the things that you've just been magnificent at is connecting and collaborating with movers and shakers. Deal with MTV. You've worked with Prince EA. You wrote the foreword for your dang book. Rihanna, Taylor Swift. Like, the list is like pretty long, so I just don't want to spend the next 45 minutes listing off the people you've worked with. How did you get the attention of MTV? How did you get on their radar? Was it emails? Were you knocking door to door? Were you doing the whole cold calling thing? How'd you get in the door?
Yeah, we were doing a movie with Paramount, and the woman that was running digital marketing made the introduction to MTV. And it was actually, interestingly enough, it was actually an introduction to Viacom, which is the parent company. And I don't even know how old I was. I got to be like probably 23, 24. And I was thrust into this boardroom with 15 of the top executives of Viacom. And one of them was one of the top executives at MTV. And he was the only one that bought into it. But he saw the vision, and that's how it proceeded. So, I mean, the thing that I've experienced is getting meetings aren't that hard. I think it's what you do at the meetings that matter. And it's like, how do I connect and close deals with these people? Is because I approach every conversation like I'm not going in trying to sell something. I really sit down and try and understand, who am I talking to on the other side of the table? What are their greatest challenges? What are their greatest pain points? And then I just see how can I help them solve their greatest problem? And sometimes that is a solution that I have, and then I contextualize the solution I have to solve that problem, which is typically 8 or 9 times out of 10. Sometimes it isn't me. Sometimes I have to make a strategic introduction to somebody I know. But, starting off in the entertainment industry, which is notoriously difficult to break through, I just saw with the film industry and also these bigger celebrities or executives is they're getting approached 90 times a day. And majority of the times they're getting approached is they can sense that that person wants to get something out of them. Like, the great analogies, if you looked at LinkedIn messaging, is like, it's appalling how bad the outreach is. And even when people try to provide value, you can see it's disguised as, I want to make a sale. So there's a lot of nuance to it. But that's essentially what has allowed me to do it. And that's, why I created the Hook Point book, is to kind of distill down all of those principles there.
I'm sorry. When you start talking about the LinkedIn DM strategies that people are employing, I don't understand how that actually works. Huge wall of text, link to buy. Like, does that actually work? Like, what are these people thinking? What are they buying into?
I have no idea. I'm sure somebody's managed to get it to work. I mean, because I've seen crazier things work, but it takes so much nuance in the copywriting um, to get cold outreach like that to really convert.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I can't even imagine people reading more than 5 words when you get those messages, but I digress. One of the things that you kind of mentioned or you mentioned, Brendan, is when you're speaking to these big companies or even small companies, they're being approached a lot. And they're being approached a lot with people saying the same things over and over and over again. Not a lot of differentiation. And one of the things that I got from Hook Point, from your book Hook Point, and I actually turned into an exercise for my mastermind group, is fighting the status quo. Okay. And I would like to hear your thought on this. What we did in our mastermind is an activity was we wrote down a list. We looked at our industry. What are 10 things that everybody in the industry takes as scripture? This is the status quo. This is the commonly held belief. And then trying to debunk that, trying to find a way to stand out, trying to find that commonly held belief in the industry and then turning it on its head. How important do you think that is in standing out, fighting the status quo?
Well, it's critically important, and there's a number of different ways that you can do it. I mean, basically, fighting the status quo is pattern disruption, and because we fall into these patterns, especially the world that we live in today with social media. There's now 4 billion people on these platforms, pushing 200 billion messages into the world every day. So it's a micro attention world from the standpoint of grabbing attention. Once you have attention, you can hold it. Like, people will watch something for a long period of time. That's why people binge watch like Stranger Things or Squid Games on Netflix, or listen to a 2.5 hour podcast. But when you're trying to grab that attention, if somebody in those first few seconds thinks they know what you're going to say or what you're offering, and they've already heard it, they're going to move on. And even if you have a unique perspective on it, it's like, going back to the LinkedIn example, is like I get so many LinkedIn messages about, we can drive leads for your business. We can help you generate qualified leads for your business. But it comes off the same way with every single company. They're saying the same thing. None of them are differentiating versus, if I were to consider it as like, well, what are the analytics and data behind it? How are you actually sourcing these leads? What's the quality of them? What are the case studies? What's, something unique about it that allows you to stand out? And that's the biggest thing is, and I think that that's a great exercise that you have, is identifying the pattern so you don't fall into it. And in the exercise that you were doing is subverting expectations, flipping things on its head. That's one tool. But it also depends on the platform and communication tool that you're using. Like, for example, with social media, one of the biggest, and I'm talking specifically organic, one of the biggest mistakes content creators make with organic is they niche down with their message. They say, I'm going to create a specific message for a specific audience. The problem is the algorithms are not looking for that. The algorithms have one goal and one goal only, and that's user retention. The longer people spend on these platforms, the more ads they serve, the more the profit they generate. And when the algorithms have billions of pieces of content to choose from, they want content that they can see to the masses. They want content they can see to millions of people and grab and hold attention. So, one of the effective tools when it comes to organic is called the generalist principle. Is how can you make your content, your video, interesting to somebody that has no interest in your business, no interest in you, doesn't know who you are. So like a prime example of that is there's a YouTuber called Graham Stephan who teaches finance to millennials. Now, finance is not a very sexy subject. So his most viewed video is how I bought a Tesla for $78. So what he's doing, it has like 7 or 8 million views. What he's doing is he's playing to that general audience. Even if you don't have an interest in finance, you would have an interest in seeing how this guy bought a Tesla for $78. And within that story that he's telling, he is teaching finance to his core expertise, to the audience that he wants. So he's going super wide with making it for a general audience, but at the same time, subtextually, he is teaching the principles of what he represents. So that's specifically for organic social media. And what that does is people may be saying, oh, well, I'm going to reach a bunch of people that are not my core target audience. Well, let's just say your average post is doing like 10,000 views and you're competing with Graham Stephan. You're a finance expert. He does 7 or 8 million views, and you're reaching 50% of your core target with each 10,000 view video, and he reaches 10%. I mean, he's going to beat you every time because he's playing that general principle. So that's another kind of way to look at it. And it's challenging, but the better you get at it, I think the better the marketing material you're going to have, whether it's playing to that general audience or playing to your niche audience. It makes you a much more effective storyteller.
It is interesting. And to me, you're kind of flipping the status quo just with that statement, because when I think typically about creating great podcast, great content, book, it's niching down. The riches are in the niches. We hear that over and over again. But I understand what you're saying. If you can reach 50% of 10,000, that's not as much as 10% of 1 million.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you can't be successful with the riches or in the niches. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. I'm just saying it's a dangerous game you're playing in the world that you're playing in, based upon how saturated it is. Now, paid advertising is a little bit different, but even in paid advertising, because you can highly target who's going to see your content. But even with paid advertising, all it's buying you is reach. It's not buying you the person tuning in and paying attention. But, even if you look at the most successful, like I'm trying to think of some like best-selling books, but like some of the best-selling books of all time, they're still playing to that general audience. Like Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Workweek. It's about like outsourcing and being smarter with your scheduling. If it was like, here's the guide to outsourcing work, and getting more organized in your business, would it have sold as many books?
No.
Exactly. He's and that's a masterful hook. And he's not diluting his message. He's not diluting the value he's providing. He's contextualizing in a way that can make the average person interested. And that's where businesses can really scale and grow, is how do you make the average person interested in like something, for example, insurance. Insurance is not typically a sexy subject, but then you see like campaigns like the guy Mayhem. It's like, it's a funny, commercial with this guy like being mayhem in people's lives, and it kind of opens people up to thinking about it in a different way. So it is a bit different against that methodology, and I'm definitely not putting that down and not saying it can't work. We've just seen a lot of success in playing that generalist principle.
Yeah. Well, so the other concept that really impacted me in the book, Brendan, by the way, Hook Point specifically, is opening up my eyes to the concept of specificity. And just in our short conversation here, you've mentioned the 4-hour work week, very specific. It's using numbers. You talked about Graham Stephan's video. I bought a Tesla for $78. I'm thinking about your book, Hook Point, How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. 1 million followers, how to build a massive social following in 30 days. I think about Mr. Beast, who's using numbers all the time. Like in every video, it's, win this private island if you're on it for 30 days. How important are using numbers in our hooks?
I think it helps. It's not a requirement, though. I mean, okay. I'm sure we could come up with many hooks. I mean, a part of the exercise that I would recommend for your mastermind group is, start making a list of the best hooks in your niche or your industry. And that can be in the form of thumbnails and headlines, book titles, ad titles, meme cards, things like that, and take those and play around with it and put your words in it. I mean, numbers do work. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a requirement and I'm trying to, I'll give you an example. Dr. Mike. He's probably one of the most famous doctors in the world because he blew up in social media. On YouTube, I think he's got like 7 million subscribers. And he's got a few videos over 30 million views, and it's real doctor reacts to good doctor. Real doctor reacts to Grey's Anatomy. So there's no numbers. But again, he's playing to the generalist principle because they want to see how a real doctor reacts to a TV show. And within that, he's sharing his expertise, his medical expertise.
Yeah, I like that. Point well taken. You don't have to use numbers. I think part of the reason that I like numbers is it almost forces you to create a hook when you're using numbers. Because it's really easy to miss the mark, I think, on a standard hook. But if you're using numbers, it feels to me like it's much harder to do that, Well,
again, you got to make sure you're not falling into the pattern, because let's just take the info product space, for example, is like, there's a lot of people selling how to make millions of dollars and things like that, is you could easily fall into that trap and come off like one of those other people.
Right.
And not, so it's really about the execution and the context of it. Like Graham Stephan's video, How I Bought a Tesla for $78. Yes, it's an amazing hook, but his storytelling is great. It's like, if the video wasn't any good, it wouldn't go viral. Like, because the algorithms would see people clicking but not watching. So, I just want to also just say, is just because you use a number, you have to execute it properly.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the trial and error takes place, right? And that's something that I really took into heart reading your book. But this sounds tough. This sounds like difficult work to me, Brendan. Creating 100 pieces of content, testing them, looking at the data, seeing what works. Let me break it down. Let me make it more simple. What should I be looking for? Am I just looking for how many people like my post? Am I looking for how many comments I get on my post? What am I looking for to know that this particular message is the message I want to stick with?
Well, I think it's first setting the expectation of what your business objectives are. That's the fundamental of all of it. But to me, I mean, there's so many ways I could answer that question. It's like, when we're looking, like, some of the nuances that we look at is like, for videos, like reach to views, what's that ratio? Because if we see the view to reach ratio below like 40%, then we know we're not stopping the scroll effectively. So then we know there's an issue with the first 3 seconds. If it's above 40%, then we start looking at the retention graph, and we're seeing, where are people falling off? How quickly are they falling off? Because that will then tell you, is it an issue with the story? So that's where I don't really get super, so we focus a lot on video, and we don't get super caught up in the likes and comments. We're looking at how much reach and distribution we can get out of the content. And typically that is all about how effective you are in stopping the scroll, and how effective you are in holding that attention once you've grabbed it. And also, I think paying attention to those metrics give you a far clearer indication of how good of a storyteller you are, versus likes and comments. It can give you some indication, but not a complete indication of what's working and what's not working. But again, each business is different, like, of what they're trying. Somebody may, for example, create a post that has 100 likes and make $10,000 off of that, versus somebody may create a video that has 10 million views and make $0 off of it. So it really all depends. I mean, our company of specializing in virality, like, the data set that we're actually looking at is not our content. We're looking at the performance of the whole ecosystem. So we have a team of analysts that are mining publicly available data on social media, determining what content is going viral and what content in that same format is not going viral, and studying the creative nuances between the two. Because we found that it's not about the message that goes viral, it's about the context. So we've talked about a few examples. Finance goes viral, medical goes viral, real estate goes viral, taxes go viral. Anything can be made to go viral if you have the right context to it. We talked about the generalist principle, but there's 50 other performance indicators that we're looking at, from like pacing, tonality, number of edits, first 3 seconds, captions, title cards, facial expressions, like what is the background, environment, because all of those elements impact whether or not that content is going to resonate with the audience. Like, to give you an example, I started in the film industry, and every film pretty much for the most part follows the same 3-act structure, which is the structure of how, a screenplay is written and how the story unfolds. Yet each of us can sit down in front of a movie and say, that is the worst movie I've ever seen. And then the next night go and sit down and say, that is the best movie I've ever seen. And yet they're using the same 3-act structure. What's the difference? Well, the difference is in the dialogue, the directing, the lighting, the actors. Those are like the contextual elements that dictate the quality or the enjoyment of that movie. The same applies for social media. The challenge that people run into with social media is any person can pull out their a phone out of their pocket, click a button, click record, and post it. And thus, not a lot of thought has to go into it. And because we live in a world with 4 billion content creators, there's so much content we're competing against, that these nuances, these creative nuances, these contextual elements of how we tell our story become critically important of whether somebody's going to stop and watch and how long are they going to watch for.
A lot of these concepts to me, Brendan, very relevant a few years ago, but to me, even more relevant now, right? Because TikTok has kind of taken over and created a new model that everybody is emulating, right? You got YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. And really, that to me seems like what modern day video is about. It's about stopping the scroll, engaging, keeping someone engaged for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. Do you feel like subscriber count even matters anymore? Does follower count even matter?
It only matters in your ability to create effective content to generate reach and distribution. Because you could have all the followers in the world, but if you're not playing to what the algorithms are looking for, then you're not going to reach those followers. In addition, TikTok kind of forced the other platforms to shift the algorithms, and the fact that you could have 0 followers on TikTok and generate 1 million views on a video. The challenge is people will generate 1 million views on that video. They'll have no idea why, and they can't reproduce it. So, yeah, I mean, it is, as you said, it is more critical than ever because the competition is just so high, and the competition is going to continue in terms of the number of creators on the platform.
Yeah, it certainly gets better and better. I mean, I had a YouTube video that I created a few years ago about how to hire and train your virtual assistant, right? Shout out to Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Workweek, great stuff. But anyway, I created this video, and at first it didn't do great. I went back in about a week later and I changed the thumbnail, I changed the title, keywords, and all of a sudden Google just started showing it to everybody. Like it's reached, I think, almost 600,000, 700,000 people on YouTube now. By far my most popular piece of content. But here's the problem that I have with it, Brendan. Obviously, I haven't been able to replicate that success. I've had some videos that have done very well, but not like to that level. But personally, I don't want to be known as the virtual assistant guy. I don't want to just be making virtual assistant content all day. Do you ever feel like, I mean, like, what would you say to someone like me? The algorithm is telling me more virtual assistant stuff, but that's not my core competency. It's part of what I do, but that's not what I do.
I don't think that that's what the algorithm is telling you.
Okay.
There was contextual elements that drove the success of that. So again, when we're doing analysis, we're doing research, we're doing insights, we're trying to help people with their social strategy. We don't care as much about the content, we care about the context. So for me, like, I would look at what were the nuanced differences between that video and your underperformers for the content that you wanted to be known for. And I'm sure there are differences in the thumbnail, in the headline, in how that video operated. What happened in the first 60 seconds? What did the retention graph look like? Because you hit something on the head with that video. Is I am sure before you made those changes to the thumbnail and headline, the retention graph looked good. It was probably retaining visitors. The problem was it wasn't bringing people in because the thumbnail and headline was not grabbing a lot of people's attention. And when you made that shift, then YouTube said, oh, well, because most traffic comes from suggested video. And they probably put, you know, the first thumbnail and headline on some videos and it just wasn't performing. So then they take it out and then you put a new one in and then they see that click-through rate go through the roof and you're retaining those users. So let's see this to more people. So it's really about learning what did you do in that video from the context, from the storytelling that you didn't do in the underperformers, and making those hypotheses that you can then leverage for future videos going forward.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. It actually makes me inspired to give my team a ton of work and go in and just completely overhaul all of my videos and thumbnails to see if
I would look at the retention graph first, you know, because
right.
I would look for videos that have a solid retention and then focus on those videos with the thumbnails and headlines.
Right. Right. I want to shift. I want to shift topics just a little bit here, Brendan. One of the, I don't want to throw anywhere under the bus, but it strikes me there's a lot of people out there that are buying followers and buying bots and buying likes and buying comments. Brendan, help me. Is there any way for me to spot when someone has bought fake followers?
Honestly, I don't know. Like I don't pay attention to that space because honestly, I feel like the fake follower game is caught on by the algorithms. Like I don't believe in fake followers, fake comments, things of that nature. It doesn't really help you at all. There are people that run contests and do meme shout outs and things and stuff. And we've tested those extensively. To me, because the trick is I know people that have generated their audience completely organically and get low engagement, reach, and distribution. And I know people that have done meme shout outs, contests, and things like that get massive reach and distribution on their content. It's about the content. Honestly, I don't spend a lot of time figuring out if people have bought fake followers. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could look at the types of comments that are on there and see if they're like generic standard comments. But I don't really know that I have spent enough time to spot like fake followers. I don't even know how you really kind of do it. I'm sure you probably can at this point, but I would be so scared that the platforms are going to take those away from you if you go down that route.
Yeah. To me, it seems like you're building your house on sand, and it's kind of top of mind. One of the podcasters that I work with spent $100 with this podcast advertising company, and he got 10,000 downloads a couple days later, and there was no real way of figuring out where they had come from, and it just, you know, it struck me as being too good to be true when I know the market and I know generally how much it costs to get a new listener for a show. And that was like 10 to 20x what to expect.
Yeah. But sometimes I'm always fascinated by that stuff. If it's $100, throw $100 at it and see what happens. You know,
sure.
I mean, I have lost more money on things that were super credible and didn't work. But I'm always one down to test things. But like you, I probably wouldn't expect much from it.
Yeah. But I mean, like kind of like the theme throughout here is pattern disruption. Look for where the attention is now. I just love that about what you do. The other thing that happens when you disrupt the pattern is you can ruffle some feathers. And I got to just shout out your book here, 1 million followers. You actually start out the book. Before the book even starts, you have a message to haters.
Yeah, because I've rewritten the book 3 times. And I also took a page from Tim Ferriss' book because he did that in his. But, you know, in the book still gets negative comments. It's like the more, and it's funny because a majority of the negative comments come from people that haven't read the book. But we took kind of the negative comments and people misunderstanding the purpose and the reason of the book, that I really wanted to put it in there to just, you know, tell people. And I'm pretty sure it's in there that I say, listen, if you bought this book and this is not what you expected, email us and we'll give you a full refund. But I really wanted to set the stage of the expectations of the how and why the book exists. Because I don't want to mislead people. I don't want people to spend all their time reading the book and being disappointed. But I just was caught up in the negative comments of people misunderstanding the purpose and the intent that I really wanted to call it out in the beginning of the book.
I like it. Well, and that's, I think, a point that you really get into in Hook Point is we're not making clickbait, we're making hooks, right? It's not clickbait. Yeah. You want to make sure you deliver on the promise. And in fact, this is again why I want to make it required reading for all my team members is we had a piece of, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think it's important. And I've got this from Roberto Blake, Sean Cannell, yourself, thumbnail, title, description, video, it all has to be in line, because if you could attract 1 million people, but if they're all bouncing after a second, then it doesn't even, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It actually hurts. I think what you're trying to do. I'm curious, Brendan, what is the favorite, you've made probably millions of pieces of content. What's the favorite piece of content that you've made?
I have a piece of content that stands out, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite. It just kind of stands out. So we found this, and this wasn't a content we produced. We found a Japanese tile roofing ad, and we slapped a meme card on it that says, "You will never guess what this ad is for." And it's gotten like 14 million views on it. And it's the perfect analogy of what we've been talking about. The context of "you'll never guess what this ad is for" is the first element of the visual hierarchy, so it gets you to stop. And then within the first few seconds after that, you see like this guy laying down in bird poop landing on his face. So then you're like, okay, what is this ad about? And it doesn't reveal it until the end, so it builds the retention. So it's all of the things that we've talked about is "you'll never guess what this ad is for" stops. You see this bird poop land on this guy's face a few seconds later, and then you want to see the end, the reveal of what it's for.
That's hilarious. Sitting down and I see people trying that. I try that. Watch till the end. I can't believe she did this. Tag 5 people. Like, how effective do you think having, because to me, those almost feel too general now, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's been overused, but there's a big distinction between you'll never guess what this ad is for and watch to the end. I feel like watch to the end, and it can still work. I still see it work, but I think it really has to do with so watch till the end is the first element of the visual hierarchy. So the most important thing is after they've seen that title, what happens in those first few seconds after they've seen it, because that will dictate the success or failure of it. Watch until the end is not driving the success. Same thing with "you will never guess what this ad is for" is not driving the success of the video. It's an element of the success. Because if I had that title and then the video wasn't good, if in those first 3 seconds a bird wasn't pooping on this guy's face, it wouldn't grab that attention. And then the story unfolding of how the ad unfolds holds it. So those are kind of like tactics that can aid it, but it needs to play in line with the other elements of the content.
Yeah, the person actually needs to care about where it's going, which is, I think, is the bird poop is the big hook there. I before we get into the rapid fire section, Brendan, there was something else that really stood out to me. I heard you talk to Chris Do about this on the Future podcast. I read about this, and it's in Hook Point, page 108 of Hook Point. The process communication model. And without going into immense detail here, you basically explain that there's 6 types of ways that people process information. There's thinkers, persisters, harmonizers, imaginers, rebels, and promoters.
Yeah, so
you could write an entire book on this, but I guess my question here, Brendan, is if you could only speak to one of them, which one's the most important?
So just to give some more context, the model breaks down, there's 6 different ways, as you mentioned, of how they perceive you, how they perceive your content. And it's mathematically driven. The data is by over 1.5 million communication assessments done worldwide. But this is where the numbers come into play that are so important. The largest segment of the population is feeling and emotion based. So they connect with your content, your brand, buy your products and services based upon how emotionally feels to them. They want to emotionally connect with you. That's 30% of the population. The second largest, 25%, is thoughts and logic. So it needs to make sense to them. They want data, information, timeframes, who, what, when, where, why. The third largest is fun based. So these people are very reactive. They want stimulating content. They want to have fun, excitement. They're really reacting to the world around them. 10% is values and opinions based. So they want to trust. They want to know you're dedicated and committed to them. Another 10% is reflective based. So they just, like the analogy I have is Albert Einstein. He would stare out the window for hours and then reflecting on the world around him to come up with his best theories. And then 5%, the smallest, is action based. So they move fast. They want the bottom line. They want the best. So it's like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible, where he's hanging off the side of planes. He's jumping off the buildings. He's just going, going, going. So when you look at that, if you had to choose one, you're going to play to the largest, feelings, which is 30%. But typically when we're working with clients, we say focus on the big three: feelings, facts, and fun, because those three represent 75% of the population. And again, this really plays into the retention that we've been talking about, and the storytelling we've been talking about is, making sure that you're not just speaking the language of how you perceive the world, but really diversifying it. Like Pixar uses this in all of their movies. So if you watch a movie like Inside Out, they have a character that's designed for each way that people perceive the world, so they can attract a diverse audience. And it's one of the reasons that Pixar is so successful and has such great reviews on all their movies.
I really appreciate you breaking that down, because I hadn't heard the process communication model before, Brendan. And it is not only, I love the concept because it's going to be relevant forever. It's not just relevant for a few minutes. And I love the idea of breaking it down to feeling, facts, and fun. Listen, y'all, if you're going to walk away from this with something, it's talk to people, feeling, facts, and fun. I love that. Brendan, before we get into the rapid fire, tell us, where's the best place that we can find you?
Yeah, if people want to work directly with myself and my team, they go to hookpoint.com. We also have a private social media mastermind called Viral Trends that they can check out at goviral.hookpoint.com. They can also direct message me on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Boom. And guess what? I'm going to put links right there, right below there. You can click the link and, you'll learn something. I know I do. And by the way, but I love your Instagram page, Brendan. It just feels like you're experimenting out loud for us. So I appreciate that. Very, very cool. All right. Rapid fire section, Brendan, buckle up, get ready, put on your parachute. We are going in. We are diving in here with Brendan Kane on the After Hours Entrepreneur. Brendan, what's the scariest movie you've ever seen?
Well, at the time, Blair Witch Project, because I thought it was real when it was released.
We talk about viral and viral marketing. That's
yeah.
They did a great job with that. If you could be any animal, what kind of animal would you be?
A dog.
Where are you going to be at professionally in 10 years?
Probably more advisory and investing.
If you could invest in one social media company, what would you invest in?
Of the current ones?
Yeah.
Probably YouTube, if it was today.
If you could sit next to anyone on a plane, who would you sit next to?
Dead or alive?
I'll give you anyone in history.
Steve Jobs.
Dig that. The metaverse, overrated or underrated?
I mean, I would say it's early. So overrated today, yes, but we really don't know what it is. So I'm not going to say overrated for the long-term future. Overrated as in there's too much emphasis. It's similar to the dot-com bust. It's like everybody is in, but there's definitely something there. It hasn't been fully flushed out yet what that is going to be. So I don't want to just say overrated in general, because I think it's going someplace. We just don't know exactly where it's going to end up.
To your point, there has been a lot of hate on Zuckerberg recently, and how Facebook is not making money and they're laying off employees. Where do you think the trajectory of Meta is going 10 years from now? Are they the top dog or are they an afterthought?
I would always bet on them. They're smart. I mean, the reason that I'm not scared about the amount of money they're investing, because they're investing in hardware as well as software. And that if they were just investing in software, then I would be concerned. But they learned their lesson with iOS and things like that. They need to own the hardware. And even if they're not the predominant player in the software space, if they control the hardware, and we see how valued Apple is, that puts them light years ahead. But they've, I have been following Facebook since the earliest days, 2005, and every year Facebook is doomed. Facebook's losing people. Facebook's dead, and they just keep going. They just keep finding ways to survive.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I'm not buying into the hype. Final question here for you, Brendan. If you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
What age? So you said 10 years ago?
Yeah, if you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what would you say?
That's a super hard question. I would say you are good enough.
Brendan said it. I agree with it. Brendan, thanks for joining the After Hours Entrepreneur, brother.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to connect with you and everybody that's tuning into this.
All right. Thanks for listening to the episode today. I hope you're walking away with some really, really good actionable stuff. That's what the After Hours Entrepreneur is about, babe. It's about taking the action, taking these tips, and really putting them into practice. And one of the tips that Brendan gave you today is look at the best hooks in your industry. What are the best companies doing, the biggest companies doing, and what are the hooks that they're using in their social media posts, in their blogs, in their videos? Look at the competition. That's a good way to accelerate ahead forward. Thanks for listening to the episode here today. Make sure you hit subscribe if you have not yet, and I will catch you here next time on After Hours Entrepreneur. Go out and make that money. Take the action, baby. See ya.